Hello, everybody. Today, I am going to read you a very famous story called Little Red Riding Hood. I hope you're ready to listen, because this is a story that many children love, and it teaches us some very important lessons. So, let's begin our story together. Once upon a time, in a village not far from the edge of a thick, green forest, there lived a sweet little girl. She was so kind and friendly that everyone in the village liked her. But there was one person who loved her more than anyone else, and that was her grandmother. Her grandmother made her many lovely things and took care of her whenever she could. One winter, her grandmother made her a beautiful red cloak with a hood, and the little girl loved it so much that she wore it all the time. Because of that, people started to call her Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood lived with her mother in a small, comfortable house. Their home was near the woods, and they could often hear the wind blowing through the trees and the birds singing. Her grandmother, however, lived alone on the other side of the forest in a tiny cottage surrounded by flowers and big old trees. Little Red Riding Hood visited her grandmother sometimes with her mother, and sometimes she went alone, because she loved her grandmother so much. One morning, Little Red Riding Hood's mother put some bread, cake, and a bottle of fresh juice into a basket. She called her daughter and said, "Grandma is not feeling so well today. She is a little sick and tired, so I want you to bring this basket to her house. I think she would love to see you and she'll enjoy the food and drink. Please remember to stay on the path and don't talk to strangers. The woods can be a little dangerous, and there are wild animals. So, you have to be careful and remember what I told you." Little Red Riding Hood was excited to see her grandmother, and she promised her mother to be careful, not to talk to strangers, and to stay on the path. She put on her favorite red cloak over her dress, took the basket, and waved goodbye as she started her journey. The morning was beautiful. The sky was blue and birds were singing in the trees. Little Red Riding Hood enjoyed the walk through the forest. She looked at the little rabbits that ran between the bushes and listened to the birds singing in the branches above her head. The sun was shining and the air smelled fresh and clean. But as she walked deeper into the forest, the shadows grew longer and the trees grew closer. Suddenly, from behind a big oak tree, a wolf appeared. The wolf was large, with sharp teeth and a thick, gray coat, but he tried to look kind and polite. "Good morning, little girl," said the wolf. "Where are you going this fine day?" Little Red Riding Hood remembered her mother's instructions, but she thought, well, the wolf seems friendly. Maybe it's all right to talk for just a moment. She answered politely, "I am going to visit my grandmother. She is sick, so I am taking her some bread and cake, and juice. She lives in the small cottage on the other side of the forest." The wolf's stomach was empty, and he became very hungry when he heard about the bread and cake. But when he listened to her, he thought of a clever idea. The wolf was a tricky animal. He smiled and asked, "Does your grandmother live far from here?" Little Red Riding Hood replied, "No, not too far. Her house is at the end of this path. It is under 3 big oak trees, right beside the rose bushes." The wolf thought, both the grandmother and the little girl must taste delicious. If I am smart, I can eat them both. The wolf was fast and strong, but he needed a plan. He didn't want to scare Little Red Riding Hood. Instead, he said, "That's very nice of you. Your grandmother will be so happy. Look at all these beautiful flowers around us. Why don't you pick some for her? They will surely make her feel better." Little Red Riding Hood looked around and saw the bright, colorful flowers growing beside the path. She thought that was a good idea. Grandma would like some flowers, too. She thanked the wolf and moved away from the path to pick flowers for her grandmother. Meanwhile, the wolf ran quickly along the main path. He dashed through the trees, jumped over bushes, and didn't stop until he saw grandmother's little house at the edge of the forest. The wolf knocked softly on the door and waited. Inside, the grandmother heard someone calling. "Who is there?" she asked. The wolf tried to speak in a soft little girl voice. "Grandma, it's me, Little Red Riding Hood. I have brought you some bread and cake. Please let me in." The grandmother, who was feeling sick and weak, believed the voice. She slowly got out of bed and walked to the door. But as soon as she opened the door, the wolf leapt inside. The grandmother was shocked and tried to run, but the wolf caught her quickly. He did not hurt her but hid her inside a large wardrobe and closed the door tightly. She was safe, but she could not get out. After that, the wolf opened a drawer and took out one of the grandmother's nightgowns and her cap. He put them on and got into her bed, pulling the blanket up to his chin and putting on her glasses. The wolf waited, pretending to be the grandmother. At the same time, Little Red Riding Hood was picking flowers. She picked red, yellow, and blue wildflowers and made a pretty bouquet. She was so busy with the flowers and the singing birds that she forgot her mother's words for a moment. Soon, she remembered her basket and her promise to go straight to grandmother's house. She stood up, took her flowers in her basket, and hurried down the path. Little Red Riding Hood arrived at her grandmother's house and knocked on the door. She heard a strange voice from inside. "Come in, my dear." She walked into the bedroom. It seemed a bit dark, and grandmother was lying in bed with her cap and glasses on. Little Red Riding Hood put down her basket and went to the bed. She looked at her grandmother carefully. Something was different. "Grandma, what big ears you have," she said. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," answered the wolf, trying to make his voice sound weak and old. "Grandma, what big eyes you have," said Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to see you with, my dear," replied the wolf. "Grandma, what big hands you have," said Little Red Riding Hood, a little surprised. "All the better to hug you with, my dear," said the wolf. But then, Little Red Riding Hood saw something even stranger. "Grandma, what big teeth you have." "All the better to eat you with," roared the wolf, and at that moment he jumped out of bed. Little Red Riding Hood was really scared. She tried to run, but the wolf was fast and blocked her way. She shouted, "Help, somebody help me." Luckily, at that very moment, a woodsman was passing by the house. He heard the cry and rushed to the door. He saw the wolf and understood at once what was happening. With his axe in hand, the woodsman ran into the room and shouted, "Stop, you bad wolf." The wolf was afraid of the woodsman. He jumped out of the window and ran into the forest. He never came back to that part of the woods again. Little Red Riding Hood was safe. The woodsman searched the room and heard some sounds from the wardrobe. He opened it and out came the grandmother, a little frightened but safe. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother hugged each other, both very happy and a bit tired from the adventure. "Thank you so much, Mr. Woodsman," said Little Red Riding Hood. "You saved us both." The grandmother thanked the woodsman, too. The three of them sat down at the little kitchen table and shared the bread, cake, and juice together. The grandmother was very happy to see her granddaughter, and Little Red Riding Hood was happy to have learned an important lesson. After the meal, Little Red Riding Hood said, "Grandma, I am sorry. I did not listen to my mother. I talked to a stranger and left the path. I wanted to bring you some flowers, but I forgot the rules." Her grandmother smiled kindly and said, "I am just happy that you are safe. You must always follow the rules and remember that the woods can be dangerous. You are lucky today, but next time, you must be very careful." Little Red Riding Hood promised to listen to her mother and grandmother from that day on. She told herself she would never speak to strangers again and would always stay on the path. The woodsman walked with Little Red Riding Hood back to her home, and her mother was so relieved to see her safe. Little Red Riding Hood hugged her mother tightly. From then on, whenever Little Red Riding Hood had to go through the woods, she always remembered to follow her mother's advice. She did not speak to strangers, she stayed on the path, and she was always careful. She visited her grandmother many more times, but nothing so dangerous happened again. And so, Little Red Riding Hood, her mother, and her grandmother lived happily. They remembered the lesson from that day. Even when she grew up, the little girl in the red cloak would tell other children, "Do not talk to strangers, and always do what your parents tell you." And that is the story of Little Red Riding Hood. Thank you for listening so well. I hope you enjoyed the story and remember to be careful and to listen to your parents, just like Little Red Riding Hood learned. See you next time for another story.